Thank you everyone for joining for another ICMI 2021 video. I am Chris Fody, joined by Vernon, and today we have Greg Ellis. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing very well, thank you for asking. How are you?
I am wonderful. I get to do my dream job, which is ICMI. And you are perhaps the most famous person I have ever talked to, with the other exception being Paul Elam. So it makes me super excited.
Well, I'm glad I'm rather than infamous.
Absolutely.
Awkward.
No.
Looks like you froze a bit. Are you still there, Greg?
I am. I'm right here.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Okay.
You just have this expression on your face that's none too flattering. Hopefully your camera will catch up.
And everybody, I encourage you to definitely ask your questions, and primarily the Zoom Q&A, but also in the Huva Q&A sections. We will be monitoring both of those. Let's get some balls rolling. And we already got somebody right now. Did you want to take that, Chris, or can I take that one?
Well, just real quick, we welcome questions, we welcome chat, but please use the question and answer for questions and the chat for conversations. We will delete any conversations in the questions and answers. Okay, so our first question comes from Douglas Wallace. Unlike many in the men's rights movement, I promote the concept of marriage, though not marriage as we know it. One of the surprises for me in the respondent was a small section on the growing support for repeal of no-fault divorce. In both the UK and many US states, like much of the Western and Eastern worlds, there are moves to weaken marriage further. Within the men's rights movement, I see a lot of people just running from marriage. Other than one article and one media outlet, what evidence do you have that people are seeing repairing marriage as a solution?
Repeat the last part again. What was it? Other than one article in one media outlet, what evidence do you have?
What evidence do you have that people are seeing repairing marriage as a solution?
Well, I don't know if I have any evidence, but I will say that, you know, I was just talking with I was just doing a podcast just before, and we were talking about the institution of marriage and the contract of marriage and the commitment of marriage, and how I think, you know, I see more younger males running from the institution and the contract of marriage. And quite frankly, look, I'm a believer in a union. I'm a believer in the vow that one takes with an other, capital O, but I don't necessarily think that has to be stipulated in a contract. Has to be formalized with an institution. If two people love each other, there should be no reason why it has to be done to connect through a government or to society's expected means and ways of how to go about doing that. And I think, you know, you look at the younger generations of males, I think I'm seeing, and I don't necessarily have reports, data, and statistics to back this up. This is just anecdotal and conversations that I have and what I see in society. I'm seeing many younger males not willing to make that commitment contractually through the institution of marriage. And why would one? Quite frankly, there is no upside. Again, it's kind of a duality answer. I'm just basically saying that I support marriage and the union, but not through, not by way of the institution and the contracted way that it's done in this way, shape, or form. So I don't know if that answered the question. Probably not, but I'm just genuinely very concerned about our younger generations of boys and males, and the messages that have been cemented through mainstream media, anti-social media, as I call it, of how we men are all bad and we need to be smashed and we're toxic, and we're not. It's nonsense. If we want equality, we have to talk about toxic femininity as well as toxic masculinity. If we want to smash the patriarchy, we have to smash the matriarchy. No one wants that. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's very clever and smart and it's cottoned on, but you know, it's a ridiculous notion. Demonizing masculinity is not the solution, it's the problem.
Jonathan Lawless asks, have you formed the opinion that family law has essentially become a job system for lawyers and the government? And do you believe that things are beyond repair?
Oh, good question. And hey, Jonathan. Are they beyond repair? We can't blow up the system and start from scratch. So we have to find a way to improve the current system and reform it in ways. I mean, I talk about the presumption of innocence being introduced into family law. It's the one branch of our legal system that doesn't offer that jurisprudence. The burden of proof must be on the accuser and not the accused. And right now it's on the accused. And when with more males as respondents than female petitioners, well, do the math. Males are in the crosshairs. Fathers are, getting forsaken. So I think we have to improve that. For the equal shared parenting laws and bills that Arkansas and Kentucky brought in. I've been working with Ohio and the representatives out of Ohio. And it looks like I think that just dropped on the floor. And I think there's a good chance that that's going to pass. After that, it's Missouri and Oklahoma. We're coming for you. So look out. And when I say we're coming for you, we're coming for you to join the armada of family champions, to be the fourth and fifth states of the union that actually, help provide relief for families and a better start for children and parents, but particularly children who are the true real innocents in any divorce proceeding. A divorce must start with the default presumption that what is in the best interest of the children is for both parents to equally share in the parenting, fathering and mothering. Every statistic, every metric shows that when a biological mother and a biological father are present, when and if possible, that children will have a way better advantage or a way better chance of having a better life as they mature and grow through adolescence and become adults. And don't we all want that generationally, so we have a better generation to kind of come behind us, our next generations of leaders and CEOs and politicians and teachers and doctors and first responders and citizens.
And let's not forget actors, directors, voice artists.
But, yes, don't forget them as well, and everyone else.
One thing I will add to that, something that was in the documentary Divorce Corp, is that unlike the criminal justice system, which is bound by the Constitution, the family court system is not. And I think that's one of the things for the repair of the system is to make them bound by the Constitution. So I'm going to move to our next question, Mr.
That's quasi-kangaroo courts. I mean, that's the thing. It's like we need to, if domestic violence is serious. So if we're going to try people for domestic violence, let's do it in criminal court, But the divorce industry lobby doesn't want that to happen because that will hurt their bottom line. And also it means that people who are accused, innocent or proven guilty, will get Miranda rights, will have due process, presumption of innocence, all of the things that are afforded to criminals. Oh, hey ho, if we afford them to parents and law-abiding citizens, it's about the dollar.
Indeed it is. So going to Mr. 0303, to tackle the family court issues, we must change the attitude towards men overall. Any suggestions how to approach that? Even somebody as loved as Johnny Depp is railroaded in the legal system, so a single individual can't change that.
Mr. 0303. How do we change attitudes to men overall? I think it starts by, on an individual by individual basis. I think it's having the courage to speak up when people are being vilified, particularly people who we don't like, we don't necessarily agree with, or we think may have done wrong. I've mentioned this before, I'm no fan of Chris Cuomo. But you know what? I will defend his right to have free speech. And also he's innocent till proven guilty, even if there are, 10, 15 accusations made against him, and they may have weight and they may have merit. And I may well think and believe that he is guilty if he's accused of something. Ultimately, he's going to be judged in a court of law by a jury, a jury of his peers or a judge. But what we seem to have fallen into recently is this judging in the court of public opinion. I forget the last part of the question. Was it to do with What can you repeat the last part of the question again?
Well, the last part of the question was just more of a statement of people being railroaded in the legal system. So I think you kind of.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, I think it was mentioned as well about Johnny Depp, even, being railroaded, someone like him. Look, 2016, he was hit with the silver bullet of the false accusation, the false allegation of domestic violence. I think we have to bring in accountability and punishment for parents or spouses or ex-spouses who make false allegations. But, this victimhood has become the new social currency, and its economy is booming. People get rewarded for it. Even someone like Jesse Smollett nearly got away with it. And how heinous is that? So I think we have to start really genuinely looking at the people who make false allegations, bringing them to account. If it can happen to Johnny Depp and Brad Pitt, me, it has, and will continue to happen to tens of thousands of other parents, predominantly men and fathers, mothers, and women too. And it's an issue with this branch of the legal system. We need to introduce a presumption of innocence. We need to keep the ball rolling and keep momentum with 50-50 shared parenting. We need to hold those accountable and punish people and parents for making false allegations of domestic violence. We need to educate experts, parents, judges, and attorneys on how to better notice the signs of parental alienation and hold alienating parents accountable. That's something that I think there is a lot of confusion about within family law about how to notice an alienating parent because it is child abuse, it's brainwashing. And we need to make sure that with child support, that financial support provides for the parent and the child, not to support state and government coffers and programs.
With that also, that if money is given for child support, that we know for a fact it's going to the child, and if the parent or the mother, in most cases, is not stealing it for their own private use. What goes to the child should go to the child.
Yeah, I mean, look, there is, how are you going to account for that? And forensic accountants, and, of course, there's going to be people who are, on both sides who are going to take advantage of the system. And it's egregious to know that you're, providing child support when it's, I guess in some cases, child and parental support. And if you're watching the other parent spending that money on themselves rather than the child, and that can be obviously that's not a good situation. But we don't have in family law. There just aren't enough avenues to be able to get relief, to report these things. There's so much confusion. It's very very convoluted, and it's almost a crime syndicate that's run, or at least a criminal. It's criminal what's happening, and it's an organized syndicate. That's why I call it a cartel, and how we can expose that cartel better, I think is important, because it's a $60 billion a year industry, the American divorce machine here in America. And you better believe that there's people really working hard to keep that the incentivization of cash over kids and profits over parents, and how we can call that out, whilst at the same time making sure that we let the people who do good. And I think there are some people who want to do good in this system, but if the system is corrupt, eventually the people will become corrupted.
Douglas Wallace asks, you spoke eloquently of the pain of going through the separation. In my case, and I think in many other respondents, male or female, I was on the back foot because I could not fall out of love quick enough. I could not fight my corner, and therefore could not fight a battle for my children's sake either. Do you have any tips for people specifically on how to defend yourself from someone you still love?
Ooh, that's a deep one. Yeah, hey Douglas. Do I have any tips for someone who, what was it again? Do I have tips for someone? What was the last part of that question?
Sure.
Any tips for people who specifically, I think specifically how to defend yourself from someone you still love? Well,
yes, yeah.
like that's a very difficult one. How do you defend yourself from someone you still have boundaries? You know, you have to explain a boundary and enforce a boundary. And I guess, you know, if you still love someone and you're defending yourself, you have to ask yourself, well, why am I still loving this person? I can talk about attachment theory, you know, the anxious attachment, or the love addict, as it's called in attachment theory, or the avoidant, the love avoidant. And many relationships, I think it was Bowlby who furthered this theory of the love avoidant, who turns away from the relationship, who consistently is ambivalent and indifferent to their partner. Many addicts are avoidants. Many alcoholics are avoidants. Again, I'm generalizing here, but and then on the other side, you'll look at the love addict, and so there are people who are love addicts, consistently moving towards the relationship. So it's that push and pull of the co-addicted love tango. And the moment, of course, the love addict turns away, the love avoidant will turn back and go, hey, where did you go? And cast out a seductive message or signal to pull the love addict back in, and hence back and forth. And when it becomes too unmanageable, one side will crack and take measures that may have devastating consequences, and act irrationally and incoherently, and go above the line. I see that happening a lot. And, you know, tips. I wrote a free downloadable ebook called The Code, which is available at therespondent.com. And anyone who's read the book can get the code, the coupon code to get the code for free. And that really is, I mean, it starts out with gentleman integrity and the origins of chivalry. You know, getting older is inevitable, becoming an elder is a skill. And what is that skill? And in the code, I offer some immediate interventions, I guess, into well-being, and how to navigate the breakdown of an interpersonal relationship. And specifically, I think, if one finds oneself in a court corridor, in a courtroom, or in a courthouse, what emotional tips, what can you do immediately to provide some self-regulation, some relief? So, you know, basically what I picked up over my years and 80 plus appearances in court of, and through working, you know, studying philosophy and phenomenology and affect theory, just one little tip is yawn. People think we yawn because we're tired. We don't. We yawn to release the emotional container of the organism of the body, and it's a self-providing relief. That's just one of the myriad of tips that I think are in the book. I think that one's in there. So yeah, thank you for the question, Douglas.
So I want to say to Dean Hedges, I'm having a little difficulty understanding your question. If you could go ahead and retype that one, try to clear it up a little bit so we can make sure we understand it properly. In the interim, I want to ask you a question about your connection to Hollywood, which I'm sure you still have some connection to. Has anyone approached you thanking you for saying what they wish they could but fear because of cancel culture?
Yep. And there's quite a few people who are going to be, we're developing a docudrama based on the book. And there's going to be some really surprising people that will be taking part in that. I mean, look, cancel culture is, I think it's become the emperor's new clothes that nobody's buying anymore. At least, you know, many people are beginning to see the naked nature of it. So there are so many people who are afraid to speak up and speak out and have a voice. And there's also people who aren't afraid. They're just strategically waiting for the right time, the right opportunity to lend their voice to a specific project. So yeah, the answer is yeah, that's going to happen.
So in your recent interview with Mike and Elizabeth, I think you mentioned something about philosophy. So are there some unique takeaways and epiphanies during your exploration of those philosophies and during your meditations?
Yeah, many. I actually wrote a book on it, a pocket oracle of philosophical quotes. I called it No Thing in Between, and that came after my poetry book. I think it was Nietzsche, the philosopher, who talked about art being the reliever when God or meaning is dead or is dying. And for me, my meaning was wavering. So I find meaning through art. Poetry helped me relieve myself and get out, expunge some of that that I was going through, the torrid time that I was having. And philosophy in particular, I think philosophy, it teaches us to question the commonly held beliefs, to think outside the box. I think philo is the derivative in terms of etymology. It's devotion. And Sophia is love or wisdom. So it's a devotion to love or a devotion to wisdom. And when I asked myself the great Socrates question, who am I? I disappeared into a deep dive dialectic of 1,000 questions and answers, thesis, antithesis, synthesis. And that at least gave me a roadmap for understanding myself, capital S, better, and how I could move forward through this and find a way to help others.
So Dean Hedges asks, domestic violence advocates have no complementary advocates for respondents. This is a disadvantage for respondents. Do you think respondent advocates could be developed?
Trying to understand that question. Hey, Dean. As I'm understanding it, DV advocates have no complementary advocates for respondents. So when you say DV advocates, I'm going to assume that you mean petitioners and people who are advocating or campaigning on behalf of domestic violence or domestic violence, quote unquote, victims. I think it's very difficult to get into and understand the nature of the psychopathy of someone who makes a false allegation, because in a way, I remember writing my book early on and I talked about victim perpetrators, and the petitioner being the victim perpetrator. And this obviously isn't true in all cases. There are many cases where a petitioner, some cases a petitioner isn't male and a father, and many more cases it's a female and a woman or a mother. And sometimes there isn't a false allegation, or domestic violence isn't in England. And sometimes that allegation is actually factual and needs to be followed through, and something needs to be done about it. This is why I'm so, I get so up in arms about the false allegations, because there's a real affront to the real victims of domestic violence. And there isn't relief within the system. So I think in terms of advocates, we can, do I think respondent advocates could be developed? Well, there is. I call it the respondent. It's the respondent book. It's the respondent video podcast series. It's the docudrama that's being developed. It's the seminars and men's retreats that I'm going to be having. I advocate for the rights of children and parents through my charity, Children and Parents United. And I came to that charitable extension came through my own personal experience, which I believe was just a vessel. It's not that it's not important, but my experience of what I came through it, I found out that there were tens of thousands of people who'd been going through this quagmire of family law, this horrific situation. And look, I mean, this afternoon, I just recorded an episode of Jordan Peterson's podcast, and we were talking about, the suicide by living grief and the unending nature of the unbearable, inescapable suffering of being separated from the meaning of your life. If it's your children, it was hard enough to have a separation from someone that if you're married, you thought you were going to be with for a long time until death do us part. And that death may not be the physical realm. It may be the actual, metaphorical death over the relationship and who's slaying it, who's killing it, and more importantly, how is it being slain or killed? Relationship doesn't need to be slaughtered. A relationship can be ended amicably with, in collaboration. And finding ways to do that, I think, is important. And that's what I'm trying to do through CPU with mediation. I've mediated myself, a couple. We've been in family law for 6 years and spent $2 million and had no relief. And I managed to mediate through in one afternoon and a morning to get them to settlement. It's not brain surgery, but it's the tangled web of family law. If we can't keep people out of court, it's going to get worse. It is getting worse. It's an exponential problem that many more people every day, every month, every year are going to be talking about. And it's actually being run. There are politicians now running on the ticket of family law. I've had a congresswoman reach out to me who's running on a family law ticket. I've been speaking with Ohio, obviously the representatives there, about the equal shared parenting bill and everything they're doing there. And the fact that they normally have 10 to 12 or 15 co-sponsors for a bill. And they now have, I think, close to 70 co-sponsors, and it's a bipartisan bill. Something's going on and something's happening that's right. You can't make any argument that has any weight or any stock against an equal shared parenting bill. It's interesting. I talked with Jordan Peterson. The podcast will be out in time, but you mentioned babies and children who, infants who need, breastfeeding. And my point is, make it 50-50, and any smart, reasonable judge and father is going to want to make sure that the child, if it's an infant, is close to mother's breast. I mean, literally and figuratively, but when we look at children who are older, but even that is like the default's 50-50, and then make the presentation to the judge, or a father can give it. It's just legally, it has to be in writing that it's 50-50. Otherwise, you are fighting for, like Brad Pitt did for many months, to get to 50-50, and that's a victory. That shouldn't be a victory. That should be the rebuttable presumption, equal shared parenting 50-50 starting point, so that we can have fathering and mothering, and both should be afforded equality, because that's what I hear a lot about these days, equality.
I just want to say real quick before I pass this on to Vernon. First off, right now, I feel like now is an exciting time to live, because we're starting to see some changes. Started off as minute, but like a snowball, it's getting bigger and bigger as it goes downhill. And I'm a writer myself. I'm working on a book, Boys and Men's Issues Handbook. And, so many of these things that are happening now, it's spelling out something much bigger happening. But I do want to say to everyone that we're about the halfway point. Feel free to ask questions, because, this is a wonderful opportunity to talk to someone who has been on the big screen, and the knowledge and experience that he has, plus with the difficulties he's gone through, he has quite a lot to say. So, whatever your question is, it doesn't have to be about his book. It doesn't have to be about his presentation. Anything you want to know, now is your time to ask. Vernon?
All right. Well, I've got a rather simple one of, what do you do to keep your head up? And what do you do to get your mind off things in some of the worst times? And what do you do to just get away?
You mean get away from yourself or get away from your environment? So I think in the age of modernity, with device dependency and the reverse psychology of the algorithm in these big tech platforms and social media platforms, it's important that we try as much as possible to just temper exercising from the eyes down and do more exercising from the neck up. So for me, it's really a lot of somatic exercises that I've learned along the way. Eastern rituals, moving meditation, qigong, music is a great healer. Nature is number one. Be in nature. Being in nature is where it's at, and everything. literally, I kid you not, if there's someone out there listening and going through some existential pain or having a hard time dealing with anything, look at a leaf, feel the wind, get underneath a raindrop, put your bare feet on the soil. The senses can really be, they can really be tended to, and the organism itself that we all have, because we think in terms of here and consciousness, but outside of consciousness, there's a lot going on in terms of affect. And we can't necessarily know what that is, but we can become more aware of that. And, find some rituals, find some ceremonies, practices to go through, whatever they may be. And just do what's right for you. When I went through this system, I was continually told by the system of judges and hearing officers and you name it, child psychologists, whatever, that I was this and I was that, and I never believed them. It's not that I disbelieved them, I just questioned. Like, that's not true for me. Nope, I'm not what you're telling me I am. I'm not. Nope, no, I'm not that either. But I wanted to understand what they were telling me and why. He who has a why can bear any how. And I want to understand why I was being told this, why the system believed this. And so it can, you can come through this stronger. And I think for me, it's really important not to come through with anger and bitterness and resentment. If you want to begin a sentence of revenge, dig 2 graves. It's pointless, but you can be smarter. And I think boundaries are really important, in relationships. I think emotional boundaries, physical boundaries, intellectual boundaries, all of that, when we're interpersonally relating and understanding that, I think is important. And knowing when to speak up, but also knowing when to remain silent and be a little bit more stoic,
You have a very poetic soul, I must say. It's great listening to you. So there's a movie called They Live with Roddy Piper. He puts on some glasses and sees the world for what it is. And I'm curious if you've had an interesting experience. Unfortunately, you were kind of just thrown into the deep end of what the world was with the family court system. But I'm wondering if you've kind of looked at projects that you've done, movies, television, cartoons, or things that you've directed, or even just other things that you've seen, and seen kind of a different perspective, like a more anti-male bias that's there that you may not have seen before.
Well, I remember looking at one of the movies. I wrote and directed a movie with for British television with Kiefer Sutherland and Stephen Fry. And I remember looking back at that, and I realized that looking back, I'd actually written about myself. That's the character Kiefer Sutherland played. So that quest for meaning and deeper, richer meaning, I think is important. And in terms of, what was the question, Chris, in terms of looking at Hollywood and the stories, whether I've noticed
that you've noticed an anti-male bias now that you may not have seen before?
Yeah, I mean, it's everywhere, isn't it? Then I spoke with Erin Pizzey, who founded the first domestic violence shelter in the world 51 years ago. Wonderful, beautiful, amazing woman that she is. And she talked about how she noticed that 6 out of 10 women who were coming into her shelter were just as, if not more violent than the men that they were purporting to say were more violent and leaving. And she spoke out about it. And of course, what happened? She got vilified. Her cat was poisoned and killed. The bomb squad was sent to her home. She had to leave England. So this is the rabid nature of the neo-feminists, or the 3rd or 4th wave feminists now, that are they are misandrists, and they're very different. I always make the distinction, very different to the equality, empowering, factual feminists whom I support and love, the Christina Hoff Sommers of the world, the Camille Paglias of the world. And I think sometimes we're in danger when we talk about these things, or I talk about them in the media, when people say feminism or feminists. You know, there are many different kinds of feminists, and some of them I wholeheartedly support, and some of them I think are just enacting the ruination and the death of the family unit, and they want fathers and men to be extinct and expunged. They don't believe that women and mothers have a place to be at home. And I think the less extreme we are about that, the less we say, you know, women should know their place and men need to just shut up and smash the patriarchy, and know that the more we can just be moderate and find a little commonality and realize that individually a couple can decide how they want to, you know, move through their relationship and their unity. If the woman or mother, wife doesn't want to work, then if they're okay with that, that's fine. No one should be castigated for an individual choice just because a section of society believes that, you know, we have to do away with men, or women shouldn't be at home. Mothers should be, you know, mothering is not a worthwhile endeavor. It's one of the most worthwhile endeavors ever. I mean, when I was growing up, we called them housewives. And I know that term went away because, you know, married to the house, you know, with many of the other terms, you know, it's like, was it woman-splaining? Is that the word that woman spreading? Am I getting it wrong? Oh no, it's mansplaining. That's right. There isn't a woman-splaining.
There's bag spreading. It's when women put their bags on seats to take up space. Bag spreading.
I've done that in the past. I'm not proud to say, you know, many years ago, I've done that. I just put my bag down and like hoping that. So it's like, yeah, it gets bags, but bag spreading is not, you know, it's not. It doesn't come through the sexist lens. It's so ridiculous. The new lexicon of language, you know, the linguistic manipulation of the extreme, and it's usually, you know, radical neo-feminists just getting on their high horses and hating on men. Could you imagine if men did that to women en masse? Imagine if we had movements and marches.
Right. We do have fresh questions from the Zoom Q&A. This one's from Don. You were in private court. Did you feel visitation time was linked to child support?
I'm not quite understanding that I was in private court part. Do I feel visitation time was linked to child support? Well, in a way, it is linked to child support because visitation time, the disomaster in divorce court is, you know, the calculations on child support and alimony are calculated through the disomaster. So this is the zero-sum game that gets played out. The more parenting time you have, the more you're rewarded in terms of finances because you are, you know, you're the caregiver of the children for that amount of time. So that's why, you know, this race to the bottom of, you know, people fight sometimes for more custody time when they don't necessarily want it, but they want the money, you know. So we have to find a better way of improving that system. Trying to remember what the last part of the question was now. What was the last part of that question? I think that was it, linked to child support. Look, child support is, I've spoken about this a little bit, what I call the child support hustle. Others have spoken about it. You know, debtors' prisons were abolished, 100 years ago? Yet child support arrears can incarcerate the parent. I think 30% of men paying child support are not even the biological father. Make sense of that. In 2010, I think it was 662,000 men were incarcerated for child support. There are no statistics on women or none that I could find. And in many cases, child support arrears go to the state, not the parent. If the receiving parent is on social assistance, so 25%, a quarter of all incarcerated men have child support arrears. And it's staggering that it's not even higher because, you know, those who don't have the wherewithal or the financial resources, the most vulnerable men among us, they're the ones that are no longer walking this earth. They're not here to tell the tale. They're not here to share their stories. And then there are so many of those men who are enduring it. I mean, I mentioned today in New York, they repealed the bail laws, I think, and they let a ton of prisoners out. But they left in the men who were paying child support because, God forbid, we let out the cash cow of men. We're denying children their human rights, their constitutional rights. And why should a state decide whether a parent? I mean, look, going off track for a moment, we saw what happened in Virginia with Youngkin winning. I don't think he won because of anything necessarily political. I think he won because it was parents over party politics. Parents saw what their children were being taught from homeschooling and social distancing, or physical distancing and social isolation through COVID. They saw what they were being taught in schools, this horrific CRT coming through the lens of teaching segregation to children as young as kindergarten. And that to me is abhorrent. But they got out and they voted and they said, enough, we're not having it, you know? And I think we're going to see more of this as the years progress. We're going to see more and more people be affected, families be affected, second, third generation, extended families, because when two parents split, you know, when two parents enter a courtroom in family law, one leads a parent, the other leads a visitor. And when two parents split, it's not just that one visitor, that entire family, that side of that family, that half of that child's family is gone, erased, sometimes for good and forever. And that is a horrific burden for a young child to bear. And it's a terrible price for a grandparent to have to pay in their latter years, when really that joy of being connected to grandchildren through your own children, it provides such a wonderful last act moment, if you will, in life. So yeah, that's my thoughts on child support. More to say on it, but I mean, you look, how do we reduce the number of dead broke dads? You know, it's a hustle. You know, it's skip child support, go to jail, lose job, repeat. Poor non-custodial parents who lack the ability to pay child support end up in modern day debtors' prisons. And judges can set the payment on presumed income, not what the non-custodial parent is actually making. And that causes fathers to enter a crushing cycle of incarceration. If they manage to pay the debts and the fines and the high interest rate charged by the state, that shouldn't go to the state. That should go to the custodial parent at the very least. It's just abhorrent. It's disgraceful. It's disgusting that money goes to the state. It's terrible that the states get $6,000 for every child that's reimbursed by the federal government for every child that's placed into foster care, and bonuses for children that are kept in foster care and moved to adoption. President Biden's VAWA Act that he put through in 1974, which is being talked about now, it's had such a damning effect on families, and yet you hear radical third and fourth wave feminist DV groups just shouting from the hilltops that they need it and they're playing victimhood, because that's where the lobbying money comes from, millions and millions and billions of grant money. And we're punishing parents at the end of the day, and particularly patriarchs. And we need to really start bringing the idea of the mythopoetic and the male, the patriarch, the father figure back into fashion, so that our children are provided some relief.
Before I ask the next question, I want to say to you, Greg, that for me, this is a privilege to talk to you, not because of the work you had done on movies or anything, but because you're really at the start of your new journey. And unfortunately, it required something bad happening to you, but you are such a force. And I'm excited to see where you go on this journey, because you can't know everything right off bat, and every day you're going to be learning new stuff, especially about what men go through. And I'm just excited where that takes you and what kind of power you put behind it. You really inspire me. So I just wanted to say that to you.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. And we don't know what we don't know, but we also don't know what anyone else knows, and we can just share what we know. So I'm, this is my mission. This is my purpose. This is, I firmly believe in this, and I will speak my mind as best as I can and try to sense make through it. And look, we have, I think I was going to say national, but I think we have a global health emergency on our hands with family law. I don't say that lightly. I think the breakdown of the family is the single biggest threat to Western civilization that we're facing today. Social laws and public policy stem from the health and well-being of family formation. Our familial tapestry is torn, and America's personality is disturbed currently. And when we've incentivized to the degree that we have family breakup, dad napping, to the degree that we have, and even child protection, quote unquote, services, that's the CPS racketeers. When I learned that for decades now, children have been removed intentionally from their homes, seized from their families, snatched, kidnapped, legally trafficked for profit, all due to legislation, or mostly due to legislation introduced in 1974, the Adoption and Safe Families Act, that offers financial incentives to the states to increase adoption numbers. So how can we, in good conscience, not call out the child snatchers of the CPS? It's a fraud against American families. Tens of thousands of children are being taken from their homes, safe homes, for the purposes of garnering federal funding. This amounts to fraud, and fraud perpetrated against children and families is abhorrent and cannot and must not be tolerated in a civilized society, period.
Oh, the things I could tell you, and I hope one day to have a conversation with you. But this isn't about me, this is about our attendees. So I move on to James Goat. Do you think that the why, and I assume he means to family court, could be as simple as money? Moat and Beam has it that people will believe the darndest thing if it justifies money flowing the way they want.
There's a lot of truth in that, James. Yeah, I mean, look, I've seen it in Hollywood. People say and they pretend to believe in certain things and opinions when they don't really. They're just too afraid to speak their mind because there are serious ramifications, particularly with cancel culture. And is it about money? Well, let's look at the size of the machine, the financial burden of divorces. Okay, so I've talked before about the nearly $60 billion a year industry, the American divorce machine. In 2002, 1.4 million divorces cost $30 billion, which is just around 21,400 per divorce. In 2008, $2.1 million cost $110, $112 billion, which is about 53,000 and change per divorce, a 140% increase from 2002. In 2020, 2.4 million divorces cost $500 billion, which is $208,000 per divorce, a 300% increase from 2008. So you can see from 2020 to 2002, it was 21,000 and change per divorce. 2020, 208,000 per divorce. The taxpayer, this is the burden of divorces, the taxpayer is spending $500 billion a year to prop up a $60 billion a year industry. Now, I'm no mathematician, but to me, I smell a rat there, something ain't right. Someone's making a tremendous amount of money. Is it the states? Is it the federal government? Is it the divorce industry lobby? And is it the, I say divorce industry, or is it the lobbying groups for the third and fourth wave radical feminist movements. I think it's probably all of the above. So they don't want it to change.
Douglas Wallace says struth, which I think is a combination of strength, truth, and stew.
That I've never heard that before. I had struth. Struth.
Actually, I think struth is like a shortening of God's truth or something like that. I think it's a Australian expression. I think.
Truth. That's the truth. That's the truth. Yeah, mate.
Douglas says it's a Britishism, like a gosh or something.
It is. It's. I think I thought it was spelled with an E, but maybe it's a W. Yeah, struth. Yeah, it's. It reminds me of being stymied. Just it's a good old. Yeah, it's a good old word. So yes, well played. It's Aussie slang, I hear. Yeah, struth. Well, we say it in England too. So, and of course, the Aussies were originally English.
Well, I'm going to start saying it. I'm going to bring it to America because it means strength and truth and stew.
Are you stewing in strength and truth?
No, I meant stew as in you eat. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah.
What can I say? Mm-hmm. Well, that's going to wrap it up for us today. God, this has been such a great interview. Again, not because of who you once were, but just the power that you have there. And I've been excited to do this for so many months. So I'm glad to have gotten to know you, to be able to talk to you, to rub elbows with you.
Same here.
So
what are some ways that people can find your stuff?
therespondent.com, therespondent.com, therespondent.com. That has information on the Respondent book, the Respondent video and podcast series, the audio book that will be released soon, as well as the charitable extension to the Respondent, CPU, Children and Parents United, which is, we're on a mission to promote and improve child well-being by providing information and resources to policymakers, practitioners, the general public, resulting in enhanced relationships and reduced conflict for those children and parents navigating our current family law systems. We have 3 cost-effective programs that we're working on developing, communication programs that promote improved interpersonal relating, mediation, solutions-oriented intervention experts to help resolve conflict disputes, and public interest law firm that we're going to build out. We are building out to provide legal advice to support the mediation process and oversee legal procedures. We'll hopefully be eventually training judges and legal practitioners on how to keep families out of court. There isn't a Red Cross for divorce. Well, there wasn't, there is now. CPU, Children and Parents United. So how can people help? That's the place to help. Go to therespondent.com, check out the nonprofit, and support what we're doing. Because I think many of the reasons why we haven't had a lot of movement in this area, and I'm new, obviously relatively new to this space, just a couple of years in, is because there hasn't been a consolidated singular message and a voice and a face to actually speak about these issues, because they're painful to talk about. You get attacked, you get misinterpreted, misunderstood, but hey ho, so be it. The truth hurts, and as long as I can keep coming from a place of empathy and love and listening with curiosity and sharing to be known, and a civil discourse, that's key. We can maybe help save more lives and provide hope to the hopeless. And if we can tend to the generations now, we're going to leave something behind that is more of a lasting legacy. Be afraid to die until you've scored some victories for humanity. That's what I say.
Wow, hard to say anything after that. So, but thank you so much. Thank you for coming out today, and I hope you have a great night.
Yes.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Vernon. And thank you to everyone else who tuned in. And thanks for the great questions. And Struth, I hear, is the immutable truth, or truth stew. And there you have it.
Truth stew. There you go.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Well.
Be well.